Hello all, and welcome back to a new episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we are reviewing The Bear Season 3, and today we're on Episode 2, titled Next. If you haven't watched it yet, this is your spoiler alert. Please check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. All right, Sarah, do you want to kick us off with an episode summary for Episode 2?
Sure. Carmy sets a new standard.
Having watched the episode, that summary is really funny.
It's so good.
Oh, it's so good. Okay, let's start off in TV and Us tradition with our episode titles of choice for Episode 2. What is yours?
Mine is non-negotiables.
Nice. Oh, if I could have a quarter for every time they said that and the F-bomb,
right?
Man, we'd be rich.
Like,
we'd be so
yeah.
rich.
Yeah.
My episode title is Evolving Every Day.
Ooh, yes. We are evolving every day. Sometimes maybe we're devolving every day, but we're evolving in some way.
Yes, we are. And sometimes we maybe don't need to be evolving every day, perhaps. We can just do what works.
Yeah. Can we just be for a hot second? Can we rest?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, well, let's dive in with our thoughts about Episode 2. We're really rocking and rolling in this episode. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about what stood out to you in Episode 2.
I loved this episode. I think it is just another really good example of how smart this show is, because it primarily takes place just in the kitchen. And the action and the tension and the excitement comes from the dialogue and the relationship between these characters and the people constantly coming and going, the crosstalk, the people shouting in from off screen, and then the way that the camera is constantly moving and the way that these moments are cut together to create such tension and such stakes. And there are moments in this episode where you can cut the tension in that room with a knife. And I'm just so impressed at the show's ability to do all of that and create these really highs and lows in the conversations to speed things up and have this sense of momentum and action. And then these moments of pause and quiet all within this episode. And it's primarily just through the dialogue. So this is an example of a type of an episode that I just love. So I ate this one up.
Yeah, there's some incredible writing in this episode, which I know you especially love and appreciate. Yeah, this episode feels like a play in a lot of ways, I think we've seen some really great moments in the kitchen with this team where they're barking out orders and commands and the next tasks that need to get done. And this episode felt just as dynamic, with most of them standing quite still, getting very heated, some of them, but there's so much drama in just them having this conversation. I was particularly impressed by the cinematography in this episode and really understanding and knowing who to cut to and having some of those close-ups of facial expressions that just communicated so much. There's a lot of really great moments with Sid's face reacting to the dialogue that you hear in the background between Carmy and Richie that I think is just fabulous. But it reminds me a lot of some of the stuff we talked about when we were reviewing Succession and how much the camera really knew and understood how to focus on some little micro reaction from one character as something is unfolding and how much that adds to the excitement and the thrill of those moments. So I was particularly impressed by that with this episode. And then also just thinking a lot about how the choice for that kind of meditative, somber first episode of the season really preparing us for the moments that happen in the second episode. They could have had this episode 2, be the premiere for season 3, but it's almost like we got eased in, and we also developed such understanding and empathy for why Carmi is wired in this specific way and fixated on these things, which really is the kind of like a center of gravity in episode 2 that I think pairs so well together. So I thought that was just some really incredible storytelling.
And I think it also highlights the differences between Carmi and the rest of the team, because the finale of season 2 was primarily focused on the team and the way that everybody rallied together to pull off service. And when you do a hard thing with other people, that typically like bonds you together because you just overcame this huge obstacle as a team. And then in the previous episode, we see Carmi just by himself. And so it's this kind of like separating of the two almost. And now we're seeing them try and reintegrate. Carmi trying to come back into the team, but almost not understanding how to do that. And so instead of, I don't know, coming in with humility and acknowledging that he screwed up and celebrating the team for what they were able to do, he comes in with his new menu and his non-negotiables. And so I thought that that was really interesting because that is creating this huge rift between them, even though they're not really talking about that. And so I think that's another good source of tension in this episode, but it's also really setting the stage for what could be an explosive source of tension for them throughout this season.
Yeah, because none of them have addressed what has happened. Like we're
Hello?
talking about the non negotiables and the changing menu and all that kind of stuff. But really, what we're talking about is all the shit that went down in that finale episode. So you're right. It's the tension is continuing to brew, and we really haven't really dug into that wound, cleaned it out, and then let it heal. Like we're still just band-aiding over it. I thought obviously in the first episode of the season, we get to see Carmi changing the menu and we get to see Sid's reaction to that, which is great. We should talk about that. But one of the other like just really great storytelling, screenwriting bits that I really loved is how we see him moving things around and adjusting things in the restaurant's front area in the first episode. And I didn't actually realize that he changed the entire layout of the restaurant and how the tables are arranged and like added new things in, which is very much Richie's expertise. And so that was really great because we get to see him do that in the first episode. And then we get to really understand the context of that in this episode, which then piles on to the scene earlier that happens where Sydney is upset that Carmi's changed all of her shit. And now we get to see Richie's reaction. So I just thought that the layering of those two things was really great. And the fact that that kind of unfolds for us over the course of 2 episodes instead of us really understanding that he did that fully in the first episode. I didn't realize that he changed some things so drastically until Richie's reaction in this episode.
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting to see just how Richie responds to all of that. I do wonder because, I mean, Carmi leaves him this voicemail apologizing. And I really was wondering, like, how did Richie feel upon listening to that? And, like, what was his reaction? And then how did that reaction maybe change when he saw the front of house completely rearranged? You know, like maybe Richie was going to come into this situation with a little bit of a different attitude, and then he saw that and he went, nope. I am not doing that. So it's interesting to maybe imagine like, oh, what did this do to Richie? Like, where is he? But what I found interesting in this episode is in the first season, Richie and Carmi are kind of antagonistic toward each other. Obviously, they're cousins, they love each other, all of that, but they are very diametrically opposed in what they're trying to do. And then over season 1 and season 2, they learn to work together and learn how to be on the same team. And then in this episode, they are opposed again. But what's interesting is that Richie now has the whole team, basically, and Carmi is kind of an antagonist about what he created. So I find that we're almost returning to some things that we explored in season one, and I'm curious to see how that's going to work out, this relationship between these two very strong personalities in this season.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, I feel like we keep uncovering these fascinating similarities between these two characters, but also where they also differ and are very different. Because you're right, in a lot of season one, and especially I think in the thick of season two, when Richie was at his most unhealthy moments, like he is creating chaos for the team. He is the agent of chaos. He's stealing the next door neighbor's electricity or whatever it was. And we see that Carmi is now the agent of chaos, that's kind of disrupting the flow and the collaboration of this team. So he's now almost taken the role that Richie had in the thick of season two, but now Carmi is the one. And it's interesting because both of them, when they're agents of chaos, are operating out of their unhealthy states and trying to prove that they are valuable, that they can contribute, that they are ambitious and got drive, and they just, it's operating out of such a place of lack, but a desire to be useful and helpful and valuable to the team. And it's just, they're overextending in that. And so therefore, there's just chaos is ensuing.
But Jen, Carmi made a docu-sign. So there's that.
Oh, I jotted down a note here where I was like, I really, I want these characters to be healthy, but when they make it so funny and fun when they are unhealthy, it's just it's I feel these two sides of me in tension, because that whole fight between Carmi and Richie is absolutely hilarious, and you've got all of the other folks that are adding flavor to the mix, and it's this bear is hilarious, and can make these moments that are very tense and very human be just so funny. And I thought that was just, again, the bear shines in this area. It's always shined in this area, but I feel like we get to see it on full display in this episode.
And I think one of the reasons why that conversation is so funny is because they're going about it like children. You know, Chef Sydney, will you tell Richie blah 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 blah? Oh, Sydney, tell Carmi to da 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 da. Like, they're using Sydney as a go-between, like they're little kids, while yelling at each other in this kitchen and just saying such harmful things, but they're doing it in the most childish way, which helps make it funny. The whole time I was watching, though, I was just like, Sid, get out of there. Like, this is not good. I get it. You're trying to build this thing. You're very invested in it. You're very talented. But, like, can we go to a less dysfunctional kitchen? Like, it's probably not going to be perfectly healthy and lovely, but surely we can do better than this. I was just like, get out of here. We can do better. You can do better. I believe in you. I was so concerned for her.
And it's just so funny too, because they are two like grown ass men, and she is like one of the
Yes.
youngest in this team, and yet she holds her cool. She's steady, she's calm, cool, and collected. We've seen her have her moments over the course of the two seasons, but I would say on the whole, she brings such a level-headedness and a steadiness to this team, and you really get to see that. So it's just visually hilarious, because she is the one being like, oh my gosh, guys, and these two grown-ass men are just going at it like children. You're right.
Well, and what I love is at one point, Sydney is like, Natalie, you want to help here? And she just goes off screen, nope. And the two just keep fighting. And so it's in those little moments where I think this show absolutely shines. I loved all of Sugar's lines from off camera that just come in every once in a while. It's just brilliant the way that those add such comedy and levity in the midst of it all, and the show is really, really good at being able to handle crosstalk and like multiple conversations all at once, and we get to see that in this episode.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments is Fack comes in, and he goes, Mom, this is scary. And you just hear Sugar go, I'm sorry, honey, that's hard. It's these dynamics that we have seen in previous seasons, and there's something really comforting and familiar about being reimmersed in all of these relational dynamics again.
Well, and it's so funny to me. It tickles me every time that Sugar is so tender toward Neil. Of all the people, she is just like extra coddling to him, like, "Oh, I know, sweetheart, don't be scared." Like, it's so funny. But then at the end, was it Francie Fack did a reservation or whatever, and Sugar completely loses it. So
Uh-huh.
there's this like weird relationship between the Berzados and the Facts that I am really hoping gets more explored in this season, because you just see a full spectrum of emotions, the way that Sugar responds to them. But you're right, it's these character dynamics that we have already come to know, and so it's just fun to see those little touches again in this episode.
And I think that's why this show works so well, is because we all have those relational dynamics, whether it's in our families or in our friend groups, that like they're so prominent, they're so distinctive, and the way that two people interact within the group are just so different from how they do with the other every possible combination. And there's something comforting and endearing about those being so entrenched and ingrained. One of the dynamics that I really love is getting to see Sid and Sugar tag team putting Carmi in his place. That brings me much joy to see these two women just be like, we need to keep you in check, buddy. Like this nope. and and I think there's a difference in the way that Carmi relates to the two of them than he does with, say, Richie or Marcus or the other folks on the team. So I get extra joy from seeing these two women put him in his place.
Well, and I love how that evolves, because the kitchen is, at first it's just Carmi in there, and he's doing whatever he's doing with the peas. Okay, whatever, enjoy that. And then Sugar walks in, and she is instantly aware that something is wrong here. And like, she looks at the list, she's like, "You good?" Knowing that he's not good. And then Sid comes in after that. And Sid also immediately knows that Carmi is not okay. And I just love that both of them have this ability to read Carmi so well, and are trying to figure out how to best communicate to him that this plan is kind of insane and that he's not okay, and trying to communicate that in a way that he will understand. And you see them trying to like to just figure that out, like, how can I get this into your skull? And then of course Richie comes in and everything blows up from there. But I love the way that these characters, they layer on top of each other, and each one brings something different to the conversation that kind of changes and morphs it just a little bit to make it more complex and more dynamic as we go along.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. There's constantly shifting, constantly evolving. And I think a lot of it also changes based on the states that each of those characters are at, like what they're going through, what they're dealing with. There's a really great scene between Sugar and Carmi where you see them just like both soften with each other, and they've always had that like tenderness in their relationship, and the way that Sugar opens him up and probes and really wants to know how he's doing, and her also willingness to be vulnerable about like, hey, I'm gonna have this baby in 2 months, and like it's a lot to think about and a lot to deal with. It's neat to see that relational dynamic as well. And I feel like that is very resonant of either the first or second episode of season 1 too, where we see how much Sugar cares and loves Carby so deeply, and is really pushing past the walls that he puts up to really uncover that emotional side for him that we know that Carmi loves to suppress.
Yeah, and not letting him hide either,
Yeah.
which I think is really important. But she doesn't do it in like an off-putting way, but you can just sense her deep care for her brother, and it's her only brother now, which I'm sure adds so much more emotion to it as well. So I'm curious to see their relationship in this season, because like we talked about in the last episode, Carmi is not in a good place.
Mm-hmm.
So how are these other people around him who are able to see that going to help maybe pull him maybe
Mm-hmm.
more towards a healthy place.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully. I think we'll go on that whole journey
We'll
with
see.
him.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep, yep, yep. Um, one of the moments that, Carmi, I think, is insufferable in so many ways in this episode, and you see him really, tunnel vision once again. And I think, episode 1 of this season really set the foundations and the setup for that, which was really great because we can really empathize with him. He's operating out of lag, out of a misplaced identity, all of this kind of stuff that stems from his past, his family dynamics as a child, blah, blah, blah. It's great. One of the moments that I think is really wonderful that the episode ends with is Carmi really softened and empathizing with Marcus. And he admits, like, I didn't face my feelings with Mikey, so don't do what I did. Like, face it, feel them, and look at it head on, and I'm gonna be here for you. I'm here to support you. There's just such a beautiful connection point between the two of them, and you get to see Carmi operating in his strengths and the things that he is so equipped with, having gone through so much. And so I think Carmi and Marcus have always had this really tender relationship. We've seen so many really sweet moments with them over the past 2 seasons, and with Marcus going through literal hell right now with losing his mom. I feel like it's amazing to see that there's this other side of Carmi, after an entire 25-minute episode of him being literally an absolute agent of chaos, to see him really empathize and connect and support Marcus by the end. And that little scene at the end was really great. And I love how balanced the bear is around showcasing that this whole human can be operating in some of their worst parts, but also have these really incredible parts that just can be drawn out and that they can leverage to connect with the people that they love. So I loved that little moment.
Yeah, it's so sweet. And you see that this team, as fractured as they are right now, they really do operate like family, and you can see the care that they all have for each other. But I also love how that conversation that Carmi has with Marcus is set up in the previous episode, where we see glimpses of Mikey's funeral and we see everybody coming out of the church, and Carmi is just sitting alone in his car. And so with that fresh in our brains, then we go to this episode and we can better understand his regret, because we've seen it. We've seen his actions in real time, and how he couldn't engage for whatever reason then, and he doesn't want Marcus to make the same mistake. So I just, again, the pacing of this show and the way that they give us little details that set up something in the future is very smart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. And I love Carmi's honesty in that scene too. To clearly he's recognized himself and has the self-awareness to understand and come to terms with, like, yeah, I didn't do it great when everything went down with Mikey. And just the clarity he has in that is really amazing. And I feel like that is the product of so much of the growth that he goes through in seasons 1 and 2 of going to counseling and sharing his feelings and admitting things to that community. There's that 7-minute scene, I forget, in one of the episodes that's like iconic. It's Jeremy Allen White doing all of his superstar stuff, where he's expressing so much. And I feel like without him having gone through that wrestling and drawing out all of that stuff with how he felt about Mikey, he wouldn't have the clarity to be able to communicate that so clearly and relate and understand Marcus in this episode. So we see the fruits of his emotional processing and his heart work that he's done over the past 2 seasons here.
Yay, emotional growth. We got to celebrate it when we can,
we do,
honestly.
Man. We really do. Every little win, every little ounce of it, we got to celebrate. It's hard. It's a lot. It's hard to feel your feelings. I understand Carmi a lot. I relate to him more than I would like to admit, let's just say.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There were times in episode 1 that I was like, "Oh no, I do that too." Like I feel like there are times when you see Carmi be in just a really, really unhealthy Enneagram 3, and you're like, ah, crap. I do that too. This is a good moment of like self-reflection and
Yeah,
like,
man.
okay, which type of Carmi are you being right now?
No, it's so true. It's so true. You see this like frenetic energy in him in this episode too. And like Jeremy Allen White, shout out to him. He does such a great job of conveying that just nothing else is in his brain right now except for this goal, this desire to prove himself. And he can't hear anything else, anyone else. There's no room for it right now because Homeboy's got tunnel vision and he's fixated on his goal.
Yeah, got to get that star, you know?
Yep.
Gotta do the non-negotiables.
Yep. Yep. Okay, other quick things that I want to mention that brought me much joy. Sweeps is going to wine school to become a
Yes.
sommelier. I'm so
Yes.
excited. He's such a fascinating character because every time he shows up in a scene, it's almost like the tensions diffuse a little bit. You know, like that we can let the air out of the balloon just a little bit. There's a soothing presence about him, and you felt that in this episode too when he walks in that scene. You just see everyone kind of just relax a little bit. They all take a deep breath and just can like let things hang loose for a hot second. So I love that the show is giving him a whole journey. I wonder if we'll see more of his character and who he is. He's always been such a calming, steady presence in this team. So I wonder if we'll get more of Sweeps' story. He's a character that's always been in the group for the past 2 seasons, but it sounds like they're potentially setting him up for some fun moments for his growth.
I'm so excited to see more of Sweeps. He is one that I have enjoyed because he brings that calming presence, like you said, but he also is so quick with what he says. And sometimes he has these zingers that are hilarious,
Yeah.
but go completely under the radar. And I just respect that. I also loved that conversation about Sweeps going to wine school. Then like Fack jumps in and Richie asks, "Aren't you allergic to grapes?" And immediately Fack replies, "Obviously." Like, what are we doing here, guys? What's going on? It was so funny. I love their relationship. And it was just one of those glimpses of humor in amidst all of the stress and tension.
Stress. Yeah. It's amazing the show's ability to have both humor and drama and tension and conflict be all operating at full cylinder. It's amazing. It's great. That's why I'm like, I want them to all be healthy, but it's just so funny when they're unhealthy and colliding with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Weird
Yeah,
tension.
no, I feel that. I feel that. It is a great source of tension. Yeah. I think what makes the show so fun, and we've talked about this before, is how they're all at different places all at the same time. And I think that helps really create these dynamic situations because not everybody's in a good place and not everybody's in a bad place. We got some real highs and some real lows and some people in the middle who are steady. And that mix is a perfect recipe for just entertainment, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we've got broken fluorescent bulbs that love to fall at the worst possible moments to really cut the tension. That was great. Perfectly timed falls of those light bulbs.
Well, and then Theo is in the mix up on the ladder trying to fix the light, but then he drops in that bomb about Claire and the air is sucked out of the room and everybody turns to Theo up on the ladder of like, wait, what? Say more about Claire. And then Theo tried to like walk it back and okay, us in the cul-de-sac are all
Yeah.
okay. Carmi is not in the cul-de-sac. But I loved those moments throughout this, whether it's a dropping of a light, whether it's the mentioning of the Claire, whether, when Gary walks in, whatever it is, to change the dynamic of the conversation or to get everybody to stop all of the side conversations and all of the crosstalk, and then we focus on one topic for a hot second, and it's like the conversation kind of like dies down a little bit, and then after that moment of like pause and like regroup, then we go back to like madness and tension and everybody talking, and then there's another point where everything will calm down and we focus on one person or one thing. And I loved the pacing of all of that, because it will help keep you entertained and engaged in what's going on, because it's so dynamic and there's so much going on. And then it also adds in those moments of humor, but then it reveals other things. So like that Claire bit, it shows so much on Carmi's face. He immediately stops what he's doing. He's been looking at his food the whole time, and this is one of the first times that he actually like looks up and engages and is like, oh wait, is there still room? Can I shoot my shot again? Like, what are we doing? So I love that it accomplishes so much. Just these little pauses or these little breaks are entertaining and sometimes funny, but they're also character revealing all at once.
Yeah. That's so true. He's been operating in one mode, and then it kind of breaks him out of that and be like, oh my gosh, there's something else that like I deeply care about beyond getting the star, proving ourselves, da, 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 da. Like he's almost like broken out of his trance that he's been in. And I think it also, from a like storytelling perspective, continues to add build up for whenever that moment happens at some point where Carmi and Claire finally get to talk or interact or meet each other, whatever that look is going to look like, like if Carmi's going to call her or whatever it is, when they meet again at some point, inevitably, we've had so much tension built up for it, for how Carmi feels about it, how important to it is to him, all that stuff. So it's a good tension moment for like just the larger narrative arc of the show.
Yeah, well, and we've also seen how bad Carmi is at apologizing too. So, might not go well. But it's just like you said, it's laying the groundwork for a potential future conversation that's going to be probably really painful to watch.
Oh yeah, indeed. Okay, any other last big things that we wanted to mention before we wrap?
Yes, this episode does one of my favorite things that this show does, and I'm gonna go on my little rant about how much I love that the bear is place-based. We get that whole montage in the beginning where we go into local restaurants in Chicago. We get to see like streets and people there in Chicago. And I love that even though this season that this restaurant is now like fine dining, this is still very much based in Chicago. And this show understands that the city of Chicago is an important part of the show, and it's almost like a character in the show, and you can't have the bear without it being in Chicago. And so I just love that the show is so intentional to constantly remind us that it is existing in this place, and it can't be the bear without this city, and how intentional it is to highlight these local restaurants and these diverse foods that we get to see. I just love it, and it brings joy to my heart every time this show does that.
Yeah, it was particularly noteworthy because I feel like it was this homage almost to these workers that are faithful to their roles and their jobs to keep the city running. Like it wasn't even just contained within the food industry and the diverse restaurants and local restaurants, but we also got to see like firefighters and street workers that really run the city and make it what it is. So I love that. And I think the show in general has, even in episode 1, showcase the labor and the preparation for food and how tedious it can be. You know, that whole scene with him peeling the peas or making the blood orange juice. Like there is a laboring that happens in order to provide for the people that come. And in the same way, the workers of the city are laboring to ensure that the city is run successfully and smoothly. And we need every piece of the puzzle in order for this city to run successfully and to be a place where people are able to thrive. And so it felt really like this homage to the city and the people that make the city run. Love it, love it. All right. Well, let's give out some awards, shall we? Some TV and Us awards. Okay. The first category is for Top Chef, and this is given to a character on the show that has earned this distinction however we want to interpret it. So, Sarah, who is your choice for Top Chef?
I would like to give this to Tina for being excited about going to the farmer's market.
So cute. Oh, I love it. She has the biggest smile on her face.
Yeah.
When Sydney's like, Tina, you'll be assigned to the farmer's market. She's like, oh, really? I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm going to give this award to Sydney for saying please when asking Carmi and Richie to shut the F up.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The grace and control that she exhibits in this episode is second to none. Like, wow.
Oh,
she's incredible.
She is yelling, can you shut the F up? And then quietly, please. I was like, wow, that was a generous please. They did not need that. But okay. The second category is achievement in chaos. What is going to get this award this week for you, Sarah?
I would like to give this to Carmi and Richie for using Sydney as their go-between in their fight.
Well, I love how their voices change too when they're like,
yes,
Chef Sydney, can you please tell? And then they talk at each other because they've forgotten that they need the go-between, and then they're just like absolutely yelling. And they'll be like, the next moment, Chef Sydney, can you please let Richie know? It's so great. That was a great device. Some great screenwriting, man.
Mm-hmm. So funny.
Yeah, so good. Okay, I am giving this award to the broken fluorescent lights. It's just such a physical thing that immediately, like in the thick of the most tense moments, just adds complete chaos. And that's so true in how real life happens sometimes. You're like in the middle of a heated conversation, just like something goes wrong. And it's honestly helpful because it kind of diffuses, like everyone kind of gets distracted a little bit and is like, okay, let's calm down for a hot second before we go at it again.
Yeah. And I loved the recurring comment of, am I finally having a stroke? Like what? And like multiple characters say that as the lights continue to flicker. So it's absolute chaos. And then you got Theo messing with the lights. It's brilliant and chaotic and absolutely entertaining.
That's so good. It's so good. Okay. Spiciest line. There should be many nominations, candidates for this award this week. Who is getting this award and for what line that they've delivered?
Okay, I want to give this to Sydney, but it's to her pause. When Carmi is describing how the menu is going to change every day, she pauses to process the information. And then she says, we're going to change everything every day. But it's that pause before she opens her mouth to speak that says literally everything. Her like, are you kidding me? I'm going to murder you. But it's all internal and she's not saying it. And she's taking a pause before she forms a more kind sentence rather than flipping the table over.
Like Richie does, yeah.
Yes.
I love that the camera is like so close up in on her face when she delivers that line.
Yes.
And the emoting through the eyebrows and the facial expression is just genius in that line that she delivers when she says, we're changing everything every day. It's great. Man, this episode's so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My choice for spiciest line is Uncle Jimmy's low blow to Carmi when he says, uh, I think Carmi basically asked him, like, where's my order for, I think it was like coffee or something like that. Uncle Jimmy brings for sugar, I believe. And Uncle Jimmy says, buddy, I called in trying to get your order, but they said it's back in the fridge yelling at itself.
Oh, it's so good. Oh my gosh. I really appreciate what Uncle Jimmy brings to this situation, and the way that he just like wafts in and out of the kitchen, and like he'll just like come in, drop a few spicy lines and then leave.
Out of there.
It's great.
Yeah.
His insults are top notch. These are not phoned in, and I respect it.
And I love that Carmi's kind of unfazed. He's like, yeah, I deserve that. And also like, yeah, it's Uncle Jimmy, like that coming from Richie, very different reaction from Carmi than Carmi's reaction to Jimmy. So that was really great. But there's also, this interesting power dynamic too of Uncle Jimmy owning the place and having funded the place that I'm sure also plays into what Uncle Jimmy feels like he can do. The freedom with which he can show up in the world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's his restaurant, so he can kind of do whatever he wants, and Carmi can't do anything about it, which in some cases I would maybe have a problem with, but not in this case, because I think especially in this episode, like Carmi needs to be put in his place a little bit, and Uncle Jimmy can do that.
Oh, it's so good. All right. Well, looking ahead to episode 3 and beyond, what are you looking forward to see or hoping to see?
I'm very curious about these group dynamics because it kind of feels like it's everybody versus Carmi, but now like Marcus is on board, so it's everybody versus Carmi and Marcus. And I'm just intrigued at how these alliances might shift and change over the course of the season. And I'm just really curious with particularly Richie and Carmi being as opposed as they are right now. How are they going to be able to make this restaurant function? And it seems like an impossible task. So we'll see just how chaotic and explosive things get as these team dynamics kind of work themselves out a little bit.
Yeah. I feel like everyone is on edge. We've got the pressure cooker cooking away, and so there's definitely like lots that could happen. And you're right, it's gonna explode in many possible different directions. Some of the things specifically I've jotted down here is Richie and Carm. I think it's been so fascinating to look at their trajectories as sometimes being aligned, sometimes being diametrically opposed to each other, and the ways that they are charting their paths. It's been really fun to see the similarities and differences in how they operate. And they're both such strong personalities in this team that when they are aligned, there's some really magical things that can happen. And when they are not, it really, like, they're such strong forces in this team that it really creates a lot of fun, explosive moments that are maybe counterproductive. So they're also just entertaining to watch. So I think it'll be fascinating to see their trajectories. There's some really great Sid leadership moments in this episode. And so I'm really intrigued to see the way that she continues to showcase her ability to lead and drive and cultivate this team. She's so steady. So I think it's fascinating to watch her growth, and maybe she won't be so steady all the time when she gets stressed, and what will that be like for her growth as well. And then I jotted on here, I'm intrigued to see what Sweeps' journey is as he goes to wine school. Is this wine school in Chicago? Is it somewhere else? Are we going to get a little Sweeps dedicated episode in the same way that we've gotten ones in the past for the previous characters? It'll just be fun to see some of these other characters' side journeys. We got to see some with Tina and Ibra in season 2. Sounds like Sweeps is growing and developing. And so it's always fun to see how this team is looking for opportunities for all of them to thrive and to have growth that they're investing in for their careers and their passions. So I think that'll be really fun to see for sweeps.
Another thing that I think is interesting is that this episode starts with that conversation between Sydney and her dad over
Yeah.
the use of the bathroom, and so I'm curious if this is setting the stage for maybe like Sydney moving out and like getting her own place or something like that. And I'm very curious because in the last season they talked a little bit about the money and how she would get paid eventually, but not immediately. And then again in this episode with the DocuSign, it's partnership agreement. And so what is that partnership agreement going to look like? What is Sydney's income going to look like? And then how is she going to maybe use that money to kind of, I don't know, start a new chapter in her life, potentially. So that's another thing that I'm looking out for. I want Sid to be okay. Is my main concern in this show. So I hope that partnership agreement doesn't completely screw her over financially.
Yeah, especially because they mentioned like you should get a lawyer to look at it. And she's like, I don't have one, and like, what does that look like for her? Yeah, we'll see. We shall see.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yep.
Man, we are really rocking and rolling and buzzing on our journey now. Fully underway in episode 2. So this is our review and discussion of episode 2 of The Bear season 3. You can find it available to stream on Hulu. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we continue our journey through The Bear Season 3. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune into your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about episode 2. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at tvnspod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back very soon to discuss episode 3. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again soon.